What's up, everybody? It's HBT with Straight Up Wrestling Show, man. Here live tonight just to come on and talk to you guys a little bit, talk to you a little bit about, basically the state of wrestling, what I'm thinking, what I think about the state of wrestling. And, I'm here to ask you a question, guys. And hey, the question could be, pretty much it's something that you have to think about. And hey, you see it in the headline or whatever I have up there, and I'm asking a question, guys: Is the talent selling wrestling, or is wrestling selling itself? Is wrestling selling itself, or is it wrestlers selling wrestling? Is wrestling selling as a brand? As a brand, wrestling selling itself as a brand, as something that we grew up watching. Something that was very popular back in the day that's still going on. Is it wrestling just selling wrestling, or is it the wrestlers that's selling wrestling? So that's one thing I think you have to ask yourself when it boils down to it, guys. I've looked at the last two ratings. The ratings I just now looked at AEW's ratings for Dynamite Wednesday night. That was at 637, and I looked at NXT's ratings the day before. That was 702. So I'm looking at both of those scenarios. And one thing about NXT over on the CW, that's kind of like disappointing me a little bit. I was thinking maybe they could pull a cool million or maybe 1.1 million when it got into the thick of things over on the CW. But right now it seems like they are going backwards, not going forward. So we'll see what plays out there, man. So, right now I'm looking at the situation with both companies and how the fans are reacting towards both companies as far as ratings go. So I'm looking at ratings a good bit, guys, and where everything is going from there, because you have SmackDown. SmackDown just left the CW. That was the number one show in wrestling. SmackDown, they was doing anywhere from 2.1 to 2.6 million. It depending on who was on the show or whatever, but for the most part, they was rating they was getting anywhere from 2.1 to 2.2 million on average, and on a good month they was getting 2.4 million and sometimes 2.6 million if Rock showed up or something like that, or if Rock and Roman showed up, they could go anywhere from 2.6 to 2.8 million. Now they are off of SmackDown, which is free TV, and they went over to USA. So the way I look at it, okay, you went to USA and you lost some fans. I mean, I'm not saying that you lost fans, that those fans are actually gone who used to watch on free TV. Now they don't have assets. Maybe don't have access to, they don't have cable, so they don't have access to the show over on the USA Network. So you down to 1.7, you down to 1.7, 1.6, sometimes 1.4. You're doing what Raw is doing. So you basically teaming up. You coming up with the same number Raw is doing. So wrestling, man. When I look at that and I look at those numbers, I'm like, hey, if the wrestlers were selling wrestling, or I'm asking, is wrestlers selling wrestlers? Or, is wrestlers selling wrestling, or is wrestling selling itself as a brand? And, people, what this is telling me, like, you look at, like I said, you're looking at what NXT is doing over on the CW. Now, their numbers have went basically back to what they had on USA. They're a little ahead this week. They did 700,000, 702. So they're a little ahead of what they've been doing, what they was doing over on USA, and they did 633 the week before. Now they are beating AEW. AEW Dynamite is back down to the 630s, the 620s. They are off. They're way off, and they have been stacking their cards, guys. Had a pretty good show last night, but the numbers did not show as far as in the ratings go. Scott Larson, I see you, my brother. Appreciate you on. I'll get your comment in just a moment. But, man, yeah, these ratings kind of concern me, guys. And then I look at the indie scene that we have here in the Carolinas, guys, and in Georgia. Over in North Carolina, man, wrestling is saturated. It really is. I mean, it's a saturated product. There's wrestling shows everywhere. In South Carolina, we have the commission. We got a state commission. There's a state athletic commission. If we didn't have that, I'm sure we would be saturated even more here. We have a lot of shows here, but it's nowhere near as over across the border over in North Carolina. Georgia have a lot of shows there too. They don't have a state, they don't have a state commission there. So, man, I'm looking at, and I look at the ratings, not the ratings. I look at the crowd, the crowd sizes that we have here in the Carolinas and in Georgia as far as independent wrestling. And man, I'm gonna just go ahead and say it. When it boils down to it, wrestling is selling itself. You still getting the same amount of people. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whoever you bring in. I'm talking about a bigger name as far as on the indie scene. If you bring a bigger name to your show, it does not matter. You still gonna get basically close to that same crowd, or maybe a few more people that they bring along with them. Now, if you bring somebody in who has a name that wrestled on the big circuit, that wrestled for WWE or AEW or something like that, or who was a big name back in the past, yes, you're gonna get a bump from that. But man, still, when it boils down to it, is it actually worth it? Is it actually worth it in the long run? But man, when it boils down to it, I'm telling you, in my opinion, wrestling sells itself. The wrestlers today, outside of Roman Reigns, maybe Cody Rhodes to a certain point, but basically Roman Reigns, and if The Rock comes back, wrestling is selling itself. These wrestlers today are not selling wrestling, guys. The wrestling as a whole is selling itself straight up. All right, man. Let me get to Scott. Let me get to these comments. Scott says, Harry, you doing an after dark? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right. All right. Scott says, yeah, I agree. Huge saturation all over in surrounding states. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's flat out crazy. But there's no doubt in my mind, man. There's no doubt in my mind. Unless somebody could pretty much get it through my head and tell me different, that wrestling, that it's the wrestlers that actually selling the tickets and that's actually having people come out. I say no way. I say no way. I say it's wrestling. I think it's the brand. Wrestling as a brand is what sells wrestling, because what you have is, as far as independence, and I'm gonna go ahead and talk about the independence a little bit. You have on the independent circuit, you have a lot of copycat leagues, a lot of copycats. You have a lot of wrestling. It's the same thing. You can go from 10 miles, you can go between 10 to 20 miles each show, and it's the same show. It's the same type of show. You can even go 50 miles away from the one place that you was at. It's the same show. 100 miles. It's the same type of show. So you have a lot of copycat leagues out here that, guys come up and do an independent territory. It's the same old thing that you seeing somewhere else. Man, and WWE still leads the charge, guys. They lead the charge. What WWE does, AEW tries to copy in some kind of way. You have TNA that tries to copy both of them in some kind of way. So you do have a copycat thing going on, and you have that with a lot of indie shows. I see they try to copy the big two or the big three whenever they can too. So you have a lot of copycatting, man. So yeah, all I can really say is wrestling as a whole, it sells itself. I don't really see a lot of superstars. I mean, you do have guys that are superstars in the industry. I guess you could say they are stars in the industry because, hey, they come to town or whatever. People line up, people wait for hours just to see these guys as they pull up. So, yes, of course, there are stars out here in wrestling. But are those stars, man, a real superstar? Now, I'll call them stars in wrestling, but a real true superstar is somebody who can pretty much translate himself outside of wrestling, who's a star outside of wrestling. And wrestling needs that, and they need it bad. They need it in a bad way, guys. Straight up, man. But hey, appreciate everybody coming in. And as you come in, wherever you at, whatever platform you're on, definitely hit that like and go ahead and share this, guys, whatever platform you're on. And I'll go ahead and talk about that a little bit later. But man, yeah, so wow, wrestling right now, it's just flat out crazy. Every time I look at it, man, I'm like, okay, I'm looking at it, and the reason I will say that it's selling itself is because it sells itself to the people who are the consumers today. They consume that product because it's wrestling, and they was huge wrestling fans. They don't actually necessarily have to like it week in and week out, because when it boils down to it, most of them, you start talking to them, they pretty much confused. The storylines a lot of times don't make sense. You have wrestlers over at AEW right now. I mean, we watched that last night, AEW Dynamite. And I have to say, me and Chris, we haven't really been watching for like the past 5 weeks, but it's kind of like easy to catch up, as long as you kind of in a loop a little bit about what's going on. But go back and we watching it last night, and I'm not going to say WWE doesn't do this too, because I'm going to get to them. They do it too. Now, what's going on is, hey, I'm not even sure who's bad guys and who's good guys, man. That's one thing that you got to have. You got to have that basic element in wrestling. Who's good guys and who's bad guys? Who's heels and who's faces? That's what you got to have that. And when you constantly maneuvering those guys back and forth, and they're basically fighting anybody, and you basically having them as fan favorites one week, and then heels the next week, and then they back to fan favorites, heels the next week. The fans, of course, they go ahead and accept it. They just sit there and they about look like, wow, this is what they're doing. And the fans that love wrestling, and I see it all the time, and I see it in these podcasts too. These podcasters out here, they just pump these wrestlers up. They pump this thing up. They pump AEW up as a whole. They want to pump it up as a whole and say all this stuff is brilliant, man. All this stuff is good. It's really good. When it's not, when it boils down to it. And WWE is doing that same thing too. They are having fan favorites. You might have guys that's good guys. They might fight another team that's good guys. Bad guys, they might fight another team that's bad guys. So it's a blur right now. They are crossing. They basically are crossing into that gray area, guys. They are. It's just flat out crazy. Is everybody is in that gray area. We don't really know, and we really don't know who's the villain and who's the heel. And you see it a lot of times as far as on the women's roster. And in my opinion, the women's roster really, need to define which ones are faces and which ones are heels. You definitely want to have that as far as women wrestling, because it makes it more appealing, to as far as the male aspect, it makes it more appealing to me. If this woman is a good woman or if she's a bad woman. And to women, I'm pretty sure the same way as far as the males. With wrestling needs to get back on that, need to get back on that flight, man. They need to get back on that trailway. They need to get back walking that route of good guys, bad guys. And I'm gonna tell you the reason, because we got so much bad going on in this world. I mean, wrestling right now could capitalize big time on it. They really can, as far as who's a good guy, because you just really don't have, a lot of times you really don't have that boy next door. These guys, man, they sit there and they say chivalry is dead and everything like that. You want that gentleman. If you can find that gentleman, man, that guy that's a overall good guy that takes care of people, that that's somebody that you would like to see, come in and maybe be a big brother to your children or something like that, be a role model. Wrestling definitely could be it. Not saying that you don't have the bad element, but you need to give us at least 30%. I say 30% of wrestling need to be a good side. I mean, go ahead and keep your 70%, of your badness and everything in wrestling, because that's what drives storylines. People love that. And so, because you look over at AEW, man, everybody wants to be a heel. All their top stars are heels now. Everybody wants to be a heel. Everybody can't be a heel. You got to have both sides of the coin, guys. You got to have a heads and you got to have a tails. Straight up, man. You got to keep that basis in wrestling if you want to generate, if you want to generate interest outside of the sport. And nobody can sit there and tell me, nobody, no fan, no promoter, nobody, no podcaster, anybody can sit there and tell me, hey, we don't want the outside world. We don't want the outside world. We don't want the mainstream inside of our business. We don't want them watching what we're watching. We don't want them to look at what we're doing. We don't want them enjoying that. We want to enjoy it ourselves. We want to hold on to it ourselves. And basically, when it boils down to it, that's what we're getting. It's like the wrestling fans today are saying, this is ours, man. This is our seat at the table. This is our chance to be cool. This is our chance to be cool. And hey, We want this for ourselves because wrestling was cool when I grew up. Everybody now, when most of these people that watch, especially my age, Generation X, a lot of the millennials, when we was growing up, man, hey, I grew up in the 70s, man, 70s and 80s. A kid in the 70s, I was a teenager in the 80s. The 90s, I was a young adult. 90s, 2000s. But hey, I gotta say, you look at these wrestling was cool. It was part of everyday life, man. Even if you didn't watch it, you could not avoid what was going on in wrestling. And you go back and you watch that Vince McMahon, that stuff that's going on with Vince McMahon. I only watched one episode, and me and Christopher Bird was talking about that. I should have been podcasting that whole thing, man. And that's why I'm going back. I'm gonna go back, and I'm starting tomorrow. I'm gonna watch the whole thing and go live and do it. Me and Chris was talking, and I remember in the 80s, man, when wrestling basically was just dominating everything. What all the stuff that Vince McMahon did, he made it an everyday thing. And even before that, as much as not Jim, but Vince McMahon, all he did was pretty much expand his empire and put WWE everywhere. But wrestling was everywhere in everybody's everyday lives, man. And of course, it was the regional territories. But everybody knew wrestling. Wrestling was a piece of the American landscape. You go into supermarkets. I mean, you go in there, the wrestling books was right there up front. We didn't have the internet. So the wrestling magazines was right there up front. And you saw on the cover of those wrestling magazines, you saw Andre the Giant. You saw Mil Mascaras. You saw Ric Flair. You saw Bruno Sammartino. Those was the big names. You saw a Dusty Rhodes. You saw a Blackjack Mulligan. You saw Ernie the Cat Ladd. You saw those guys live and in color and in your face, man. All the pages wasn't in color that was in the book. It was black and white, but on the cover of the magazines of Inside Wrestling, Sports Review Wrestling, The Wrestler, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, all those magazines back in the 70s and 80s, man, early 90s and in the 90s or whatever, even to till today. But the wrestling magazines back in the day, man, just like you can go, maybe go through the aisles where it would have something like maybe a what you call those soap opera digest or whatever, Time magazines. It might have a Star, one of those Star publications or whatever, something like that. But sometimes they will have the wrestling. Some stores actually put the wrestling magazines up front, and the wrestling magazines will be staring you right in the face as you went up to the registers and things like that. You couldn't miss them, man. You definitely couldn't miss them. Or if there was a magazine rack, the wrestling magazines usually was in the front. It was in the front. They used to have the wrestling magazine in front of the football magazines, like the sports football magazines and things that came out, Athlon and everything. The wrestling magazines was in front of them because they outsold them. The wrestling magazines sold like flipping crazy. The wrestling fans just up and just bought those things. They just did, man. We just did. Or we read them, and then if you didn't have the money then, you came back and you hoped that magazine would still be on the shelf. A lot of times it wasn't on the shelf. So best thing to do is grab it as soon as you could. But the wrestling magazine was part of the fabric of the United States. I mean, as far as America, the wrestling magazine was it, man. But yeah, wrestling was selling, not just wrestling sold itself. Everybody was involved in it. The promoters, I got to give it to the promoters, up to the promoters first. They was the big sellers of wrestling. Then you got to give it up to the wrestling magazines, the Bill Apters, man. You got to give it up to people like him, Dave Meltzer, whoever else was involved in that, Stanley Wetson. You got to give it up to these guys, man. They were the guys who sold the wrestling magazines, the wrestling articles and things. They made wrestling huge, guys, huge. And then you have to go to the regional territories and your local TV stations, man, the syndication stations. They made wrestling just this huge phenomenon. They just made it huge. But like I say, Vince came in and did his thing. And I'm not going to say everything he did was bad, but overall, man, it did not play out too well in the end, because right now we are seeing the results of what Vince McMahon actually done to the wrestling business. And Man, am I blaming it all on Vince? No, I'm not. I mean, of course, Jim Crockett had his hand in it. Jim Crockett played his hand, and he was very big. His company, even though it was a small Southern company at first, it ended up being a big, huge company. But, when it boils down to it, hey, Jerry Lawler, who else? Jeff Jarrett, Daddy, Jerry Jarrett, let's see, Bill Watts, all these guys, man, all these guys had their chance to even grow and be bigger. I mean, Bill Watts, he grew the UWF there for a while. It got big, and he was wanting to get bigger. But over where he was running, Louisiana, Texas, and things like that, the old Mid-South territory, that's what UWF came from. That right there, the oil business dried up. People didn't have as much money and everything like that, so they wasn't coming out to really see in the matches. He ended up selling to Turner, and Turner pretty much he killed the territory and dwarfed whatever he wanted to into Jim Crockett Promotions, which he shouldn't have done that when it boils down to it. But man, but like I say, the wrestlers back then, I have to say the wrestlers sold. They sold. The wrestlers sold the business. The wrestlers made the business. But first I'm going to give it to the promoters, but the promoters and the wrestlers made the business. Now I say wrestling, is still living off of what it was before. It's still living off of the reputation. It's still living off of wrestling being a entity. But, I would say it's living off of the WWE's name, the World Wrestling Federation, WWF, WWE, WWF, WCW, ECW. People are still longing for that. That's what wrestling is about. That's what wrestling, that's what people are looking at. They are looking at that, and wrestling is selling itself because of the past, man. That's what it is. When it boils down to it, if you ask me, what we are hoping for in wrestling, what we are living for, what we are looking for. I believe wrestlers every week. I mean, not wrestlers, but wrestling fans week in and week out, especially a lot of these wrestling fans that go out here to the indie promotions. Wrestling fans are dying to get something that they got when they was growing up, something that grabbed their attention when they was growing up. That's what wrestling fans are longing for. They want that, guys. They want that. That's why I say wrestling, it sells itself. People are trying to get a little bit of what they had growing up. They just are. Wrestling, do we have the wrestlers today that can sell like they did back in the day? And I can't blame it all on the wrestlers. I blame it on the people that's booking them. I blame it on the Triple H's. I blame it on Tony Khan's. I blame it on those guys. The way they book it, book wrestling now. Can you really build a huge superstar the way they book wrestling today? I don't think so. In my mind, I don't think so. Of course, Roman Reigns was built, but who built Roman Reigns, man? When it boiled down to it, that was Vince McMahon. He stayed on Roman Reigns. He pushed Roman Reigns on people time and time again. But yeah, it was Vince McMahon who built Roman Reigns, man. And it does not matter what nobody says. He really did. He built Roman Reigns. So it's on Triple H when it boils down to it to keep everything going with that, guys, straight up. But let me go ahead and I'm gonna have to do a little bit of sharing here, guys. So give me just a moment. Let's see. All right, guys. But yeah, man, I'm just like, give me just a minute, guys. But hey, if you are on YouTube, hit the like, share, join. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, ding, ding, ding. And so you know when we're on, times like these, man. Wow. If you're over on Twitch, you do the same thing that you do over here on YouTube. You hit the like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, ding, ding, ding. So you know when we're on times like these. If you're on Facebook, hit that like, share, join. If you see us over there on X, guys, hit that like, tweet, and retweet, and follow the Straight Up Wrestling Show over on X, guys. We still trying to do a lot of things, man. I'm over my name, Harry Bernard Taylor, over on TikTok. You got TikTok, go over there and check that out. And I'm pretty sure some people over on TikTok have came over to see what the Straight Up Wrestling Show thing is about. I just now got on TikTok, and I do a lot of videos, pretty much, referencing the Straight Up Wrestling Show. So I'm pretty sure they come in, we got some people coming to check out the Straight Up Wrestling Show. Hold on for a second, guys. Give me just a moment here. All right, guys. But yes. All right, man. But wow. But yeah, wrestling, and yeah, in my opinion, yeah, wrestling sells itself now. Wrestling definitely selling itself. I just don't know. I just don't know. I can go down the list of the biggest names in wrestling today. And I don't know if I can pinpoint wrestlers. It's not a certain group of wrestlers I can pinpoint and say, okay, this is the reason that that the WWE is selling 9,000 tickets everywhere they go. It's not a certain group of wrestlers I can pick out in AEW and say this is the reason that AEW is selling a couple thousand seats everywhere they go. I mean, AEW, they're at a standstill. They're at a standstill. They're selling anywhere from 2,000 to 2,400 seats, maybe 2,600. Sometimes they get 2,800, but they are not getting 3,000 people into their arenas. And they have a huge budget and they advertise like crazy, but they're not selling 3,000 seat tickets. I mean, 3,000. They're not getting 3,000 people in their buildings, and it's not going to happen with Bobby Lashley coming in either, guys. He's not going to move the needle like that. He's not going to move the needle as far as ratings, and he's not going to put people in seats. He's really not. Man, only way you can do that if, like I say, you got the Hurt Syndicate coming in, but you got to have something for them. You just do. You can't just put them out there, man, and just expect them to have something spectacular. Because when it boils down to it, we've seen spectacular groups in AEW. We've seen House of Black. We've seen the BCC. Blackpool Combat Club. That was a devastating group. We've seen great groups come together and do some great things over in AEW. But man, yeah, one man is not going to move the needle. One group over there is not going to move the needle. You got to have great storylines. And of course, they've been doing some storylines, man. They have been doing some storylines. But is it all culminating in something great, something spectacular? And I mean, you just got to have that in wrestling, guys. You got to have that. I don't care what you do. I don't care what you do. What kind of moment that you having. We had great moment. The best moment that we've had with the Bloodline is when Sami Zayn was involved in that. When Sami Zayn was involved in that, that was outstanding, guys. We have to say that was outstanding what they did with Sami Zayn in the Bloodline. So to me, anywhere the Bloodline went, there was some people that showed up because of what was going on with the Bloodline. Sami Zayn, along with Roman Reigns and those brothers, man, the Usos. I definitely believe that that has something to do with the selling, of WWE, and the ratings was a lot better too when that was going on. As far as the Judgment Day had something really strong going on, especially when Edge was a part of that thing. That was, man, they looked great. That looked outstanding. That was a strong group. Still was a strong group after Edge had left. It still was a strong group. With Damian Priest, Rhea Ripley, what is his name, man? Doggone Dominic Mysterio, and then they added JD Madonna in. But yeah, still a strong group, and they had my man in there. They have a man in there. What is his name, man? I can't even think of his name right now. Goodness sake, the Prince. What is his name, man? Goodness sake, man. I think he's one of the best too in the business today. Can't even think of his name right now. All right. Chandler Wright, what's going on? Chandler says they shouldn't have done Jay like that. When this war game bloodline stuff is over, Jay got to get that IC belt back. Chandler Wright, look. I can agree with you as far as I agree with you 100%. Jay shouldn't have lost that belt. He shouldn't have lost that belt Friday. That was too soon. That was just crazy what they did. I don't know if he should get the title back once that thing is over. I think they need to go on an iconic run as far as the Usos, as the brothers, maybe win that title again, and then Jay can end up, maybe after 8 or 9 months, go back and win that title again or win a title. But when it boils down to it, they did need to do it, but it didn't need to happen at that time. It was the timing was really messed up, and I knew they was going to do it, and I was like, wow, why in the world are you guys doing that right now? You had something epic. You had something epic that was building. Let it keep building. That they should have gave at least 3 more weeks. I say 3 more weeks. Me and Chris was talking about this here on the podcast. Give it 3 more weeks. Give it at least 2 weeks at the least, and let Jay hold on to his belt. It would have been good for Jay to go into that feud and helping Jimmy and helping Roman out. It would have been good for him to go into that as that title holder, and maybe losing it while he's helping them out. He ended up losing it by fluke to Braun Breaker. But the thing about it, you got to keep Braun Breaker. You got to make him look very strong though. But he ended up losing the belt to Braun Breaker because he's so focused on what's going on with the Bloodline storyline. Him helping Jimmy and Roman against Solo and company, that he could not do both. That he ended up losing his train of thought or whatever. They come out and he has to confront them or whatever, and he takes his eyes off, and Braun Breaker roll him up or do something, get the pin on him. But man, yes, I agree with you 100%. He should have kept the title, but I don't think he should have got that title when he got it. When he did get it, I thought it was a very weak move. Braun Breaker hadn't had the title for a long time. Braun Breaker should have been a long time title holder. But the whole thing about it is, when they came to Greenville, South Carolina, my hometown. Me and Christopher Burton was there. I mean, man, Jay, that was a week after they was over in Paris, and Jay was hot as fire, man. He was on fire. He was lit. I mean, the crowd was going crazy for him. And then the next week they went, I think they was in Greensboro, North Carolina or whatever, and the crowd was just crazy. I had never heard the yeet so loud during those 2 shows right there. So and in Paris, that 3-week run right there is the time they should have put a title on him. And I think maybe he should have got the IC belt around that time, but he should have got a title. So they waited too long. They waited 3-4 months after that, which was just messed up. But yeah, when they was in Greenville, I think that was on a Monday night. That was a Monday Night Raw, because we did SmackDown in Greenville 3 or 4 weeks ago. But that was that Monday Night Raw, and man, he was hot, man. That was the hottest I think I've ever seen him. I've ever seen him, and he's getting that back. But the whole thing is this. You have Jey Uso. He has to build it back up for himself, man, and he shouldn't have to. When the iron is hot, they need to strike. They should have been put that singles title on him. And LA Knight, even though I didn't like LA Knight, I couldn't stand him for a long time. I kept telling everybody, LA Knight should have that title when they had that belt on Logan Paul. I'm like, you need to take that title off of Logan Paul, put it on LA Knight. When LA Knight was hot, he had to keep rebuilding himself, going down, rebuilding himself. They had him losing, rebuilding himself. He had to continue to do it. And when they put it on him, a lot of the heat, a lot of the the popularity, the hype that he had built up, had drained. It really had. So you got to capture those moments when the time is right. So I put that on the promoters, guys. I definitely put that on the promoters. So, that right there is another thing that hurts ticket sales. It hurts. It hurts. I say it hurts as far as, consumers consuming it on TV. They might sell out, because the WWE is selling out everywhere. Everywhere they go, they sell out. Even though it says on Ticketmaster they sold 9,000 in Greenville, 10,000 in Greenville, or whatever. When you look at the arena seats 15, 16,000. Everywhere was, there wasn't a seat in the house. Outside of, they had one little small area up top that was covered, and that probably sat probably about 1,000 there. But they had that one area covered up. So I give them big praise, man, for selling out in Greenville, South Carolina, and we 45 minutes, 40 minutes away from Asheville, guys. And, we got hit. We got hit, not as bad as them, but we got hit real bad. And a lot of people, they did this, a week after Helene, so a week and a half after Helene, so I get them big credit. But people came out for wrestling when it boiled down to it. I just went because it's wrestling. I don't, back in the day, it was like, hey, Ric Flair is coming to town. So hey, boom, I was in Greenville because Ric Flair was coming to town. Or, they would say, hey, Angelo Moscow's coming to town. Ernie the Cat Ladd's coming to town. Boom. Man, I made sure I showed up. Because, I used to go every week all the time with my grandma or whatever during the summertime, but during school year, I didn't do that. I wasn't going every week because my mom did not go. My parents, whatever, they wasn't, wrestling fans. I mean, they was wrestling fans or whatever. And if they heard on the radio, which it used to be advertised on the radio that the world champion was going to be in town, they would say, you got to go. The world champion is going to be in town. But I mean, if Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood was on the card, man, I made sure I was there. In the late 80s, early 90s, Ricky Scott Steiner was going to be on the card. I definitely made sure I was there, so, Doom was going to be in town. I was going to be there, man. Hey, I wanted to see Teddy Riley, bring Doom out. Those guys were bad, boy. They were some bad boys. So, so the wrestlers actually sold it. And I even remember when, the WWE would come to town, they would come here. And most fans here just couldn't stand them. So, they would not go to the Greenville Auditorium. They would go over to Furman Paladin Stadium. And, they would sell like a couple thousand tickets or whatever, but they would bring Hulk Hogan. They was trying to, come into Jim Crockett's area and make a splash. And they would bring they bring Randy Savage, Hulk Hogan or whatever, even though they sell a couple thousand tickets, even though they could go up north or whatever and, sell 10,000, 15,000 tickets anywhere. But they would come here, to these small arenas because they wanted to break in to the market here. But a lot of people would go and, they would tell me, I'm going to see Hulk Hogan or I'm going to see Randy Savage, even though they was big Mid-Atlantic Championship wrestling fans, Jim Crockett Promotions fans, or Georgia Championship Wrestling or whatever. They, really didn't care for that brand of wrestling, but Hulk Hogan was such a big name, and Randy Savage, Macho Man Randy Savage, and Hacksaw Jim Duggan and people like that they would go. They say, look, I'm going to go just so I can see those guys. So, wrestlers back then was selling it, man. Now, hey, people just go because, hey, it's wrestling. All right, my man Chandler says they shouldn't have done that to Jay. Like that. When this war game, bloodline stuff is over, Jay got to get that IC belt back. Eventually, he's going to get a singles title back. He should. Chandler says, I like your opinion. Long-term storytelling. I just hate Jay had little time with the strap. That is 100% correct. Chandler, I hate that what they did. When Nature Boy showed up, you had to go. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No ins, ands, or buts about it. No ins, ands, or buts about it. You could not miss the Nature Boy, man. If he was coming to town, you had to be there. Straight up, man. Straight up. But man, that's one thing I wanted to talk about is today. Wrestling today. Is the wrestlers actually selling it? Is wrestling, the promoters and wrestling, promoters and the wrestlers, are they the ones actually selling a product, or wrestling as itself is holding up on its own? It has to hold up on its own as a brand. And people are out there watching it because it's a brand. It's something that they loved when they was growing up, and they are banking on hope. They're banking on hope. And speaking of, Chandler, hey man, speaking on long-term storylines, long-term storytelling. Yeah, I really believe that the fans, man, the consumers of wrestling, that's what they're hoping for, that they get a long-term storyline that's great, that's outstanding. Something like, man, I'm gonna go back for, one of the greatest storylines in history, man. First, like I say, you got to look at Ricky Steamboat, Ric Flair. That thing went from the 70s, from 76 to 1992. You go back to those guys feuding in Jim Crockett Promotions and Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling back in the mid 70s up to like 92. And man, 76 to 79 was just outstanding between those two. And then, a little bit in the early 80s, those guys feuded with each other. Then you got to look at somebody like Dusty Rhodes against the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Those things sold big time. And then Ric Flair come back and had that, that trilogy, and probably some of the greatest matches ever. Definitely top 5 greatest matches ever. And, because I can't compare what they did there, in 89 to what they was doing back in the 70s, because they actually had better matches in the 70s, at some arenas around the Carolinas and Virginias. Carolinas and Virginia, man, they had some incredible matches. They really did. They back when they was in a prime, that was prime Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat. But man, they had some outstanding matches, man. Hey, Barry Windham versus Ric Flair, 90-minute matches, man. They was incredible. But yeah, wrestlers actually sold. The wrestlers actually sold. They was a big part of selling wrestling, but the promoters was so good, man. Very good. They was very good at getting involved with their bookers and coming up with something great as far as storylines. The storylines sold themselves. There was so many elements of wrestling that sold the sport. We don't have that no more, guys. Really don't. But man, yeah, long-term storytelling. Greg the Hammer Valentine against Roddy Piper. You can't beat that. That culminated in Roddy Piper getting his eardrum busted up. And they settled it at Starrcade, man. The first Starrcade. Incredible what went down there. You can't beat that. You go back and you look at that. And, there's a lot of people go back and look at the match and they're amazed at what went down in the match. But if you go back and you look at the archives and see what went down, man, you will be flabbergasted in the long feud that they had. I'm gonna go a couple years past that and talk about the Boogie Woogie Man Jimmy Valiant and how long Jim Crockett Promotions was able to put him in the storyline and actually sell out. And he was basically on the C team. They had the A team, the B team, and the C team. As far as going around to the arenas, you might have Ric Flair over in Roanoke, Virginia. You might have Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat headlining in Roanoke, Virginia, and then you have Chief Wahoo McDaniel and Paul Jones in Greensboro, North Carolina, headlining in Greenville, South Carolina. You will have Jimmy the Boogie Woogie Man Valiant against Paul Jones' army, against Gary Hart's army, against the Great Kabuki or somebody like that, man, or Abdullah the Butcher or whoever, the Barbarian, one of his henchmen, the Masked Superstar. You will have Jimmy Valiant. They used that so well. Over the years, I mean, he feuded with so many different people out of Gary Hart's and Paul Jones' army. He feuded back and forth, but they made so much money for like a 3 to 4 year run of Jimmy the Boogie Woogie Man Valiant. It was incredible, man. It was legendary. It's legendary. I mean, I have to say this guy made almost as much money as Dusty Rhodes and Nikita Koloff and all these guys. They was bigger names. Lex Luger, Jimmy Boogie Woogie Man Valiant, he didn't really need a title, even though he did win a Mid-Atlantic belt, and I think he won a TV title once. But I know he had the Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Championship. But this guy, man, they made so much money off of him in long-term storytelling, long-term storytelling that Paul Jones and Gary Hart was able to play with him. Man, Paul Jones turned Pistol Pez Watley against him. Shasta Watley. They did the same thing in the WWE. I can't say they didn't have long-term storytelling over there too, because King Kong Bundy and Hulk Hogan, that thing went on for months. That was some good long-term storytelling. You had Randy Macho Man Savage against Ricky Steamboat, long-term storytelling. Very good, very outstanding feud. Rick Rude versus Randy Savage was a long-term storytelling feud. Man, it's a lot of great things that happened there too. So, man, I can go on and on. I can talk about the AWA and the long-term storytelling. But, like I say, it was so many elements in wrestling. People came to see, they came to the arenas to see the commentators that was there, the people that, that made the wrestlers look good, the ring announcers and things like that. It was other people outside of the business that made the people look good. And they still have that today. But what I'm saying is wrestling as a brand. It's a brand. The WWE is that name what sells it. It really is. It really is. All right, my man Chandler says, I agree. Nothing like Dusty versus Rick. I wasn't around for those times, but as a wrestling fanatic, I watched all the old stuff. Nobody was like the American Dream, no doubt about it. Roddy Piper is the best heel that ever lived. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. I mean, I'd give Ric Flair when he was healing it up. I definitely put him in a running with Roddy Piper, but Roddy Piper outdid Rick. He really did. But man, I mean, it's some incredible stuff, man. Incredible stuff. What was going on back in the day. But yeah, in my opinion, I think wrestling sells itself. And that's not to be disrespectful towards, let me see if I can name like 10 people that's really selling. I say I can name about 5 to 7. No, I'd probably name a few that's selling. I'll say Roman sells, Cody Rhodes. If Cody Rhodes coming, people got to come. Cody Rhodes is still a person that sells. Let's see, CM Punk. CM Punk, as much as I don't really care for CM Punk, but CM Punk, definitely sells tickets. Let's see, who else sells tickets? Man, wow. I have to say Bianca Belair. Bianca Belair sells tickets. There's other women that might be a little bit better, but that girl is so popular, man. That female is so popular with so many people. So many kids love her and everything. You see it in the crowds. Wherever you go, you see it in the crowds, how people respond to her. So, yeah, she is another one who sells tickets. Let's see. Goodness sake, man. I'm trying to think of – it's hard to think. I mean, Drew McIntyre probably put some butts in seats. Let's see. I really can't think of a lot more wrestlers out. I mean, I'm talking about active wrestlers, guys. Active. I say Braun Breaker. Braun Breaker, when they would come and do those pay-per-views with NXT, a lot of people used to go out because people was really intrigued with Braun. He sold a lot. Yes, you're right about that, Chandler. CM Punk sells more than all. Well, he's huge, man. Seth Rollins, yes, Seth freaking Rollins definitely sells. Yes, Becky Lynch was selling when his wife was selling too. Now, CM Punk, I'm not going to say he sells more than all, but he's one of the top sellers. Now, he definitely was, for AEW sold more than everybody. Now, because see, Cody Rhodes is number 5. Cody Rhodes is in the top 5 of the merch sellers in the country. In the country of all athletes. He's in the top 5, I think, in the world of all athletes in merchandise sales. No, we haven't had a wrestler do that since John Cena, I think. It's been a long time since any wrestler done that. I don't even know if John Cena was doing it. I think it's The Rock. We haven't had that since The Rock. The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin been in the top 5. So people are paying attention. There's some people out there paying attention, and I believe a lot of it has to do with the Rhodes name. I think Cody Rhodes I think it's a play off Dusty Rhodes because, hey, like it or not, man, everybody knew who Dusty Rhodes was. Everybody knew him. And, people are taking, people have taken a liking to, hey, Rhodes' kid is out here. He's doing great things. So Cody Rhodes, a lot of people are looking at what he's doing and saying, hey, man, that's Dusty's son. Hey, go ahead and get it done, brother. They like him. They like him a lot better than they did Dustin. So, yeah, Cody Rhodes is outselling. He's the number. He's in the top 5. They didn't say exactly what it was where he's at, but he's in the top 5 in the world, I believe, as far as in merch sales. I know at least a couple weeks ago he was. So, man, that's selling. That's saying a lot. That's saying a lot. No other wrestler comes close to that. Not even Roman Reigns. So, yeah, so got to give it up for Cody. All right, my man Chandler says Seth Rollins also sells. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Randy Orton is a draw. Yes, sir, Scott Larson. Yes, sir. Randy Orton is a draw. A legend, man, a living legend. Definitely a draw. But, yeah, all these guys right now, all these guys are in WWE. AEW, who do they have, man? John Moxley, is John Moxley really putting people in seats? I don't know about all that. Chris Jericho, not no more. Not no more. So, I mean, Ricochet, they brought Ricochet in. Maybe a couple people, as far as interest go, but not enough to make an impact, guys, and change the payroll. Mercedes Moné, they thought she was going to do that, but that didn't happen. Now, Mercedes Moné came back to WWE. Could she make a big difference and put more tails in seats? Yeah, I believe that 100% because they know how to market her. They know what positions to put her in to make her look really good. They wouldn't put her on the mic and let her speak for a long time. AEW, they messed up the way they brought her in. They messed up the way they brought MVP in. That was real bad. I mean, I ain't gonna say it was real bad. There was no reaction. He just came out and he confronted Prince Nana off the bat. You don't do something like that with a great speaker like MVP. MVP, man, you can have great vignettes with MVP. You can have him doing great things, talking for 2, maybe 3 weeks. Just like they used to do back in the day, have nice videos or whatever, him talking and talking about what he's gonna come and do, and he's bringing his Hurt Syndicate over to AEW, and they're gonna do damage, and everybody better watch out. He could have put fear in a lot of people over in AEW and had everybody talking about that. This Hurt Syndicate. And it could have been showing, maybe video of Shelton Benjamin doing damage, even Bobby Lashley doing damage, and anybody else that they want to add to the Hurt Syndicate doing damage, man. And saying, hey, our first target is Prince Nana. We're going to get you out of there. We want Swerve Strickland to join us. If he don't join us, then, hey, there's a price to pay. But, man, you got to be strategic with stuff like this. You really do. You got to make those guys, the Hurt Syndicate, put fear into everybody from the House of Black to John Moxley to everybody, MJF, everybody. Like, hey, these guys coming in and they ain't joking around. But that's how you sell wrestling, guys. You sell wrestling with the intrigue, with the drama. And it has to be something special. It's got to be special. It's got to be something spectacular. If not, you got to have wrestlers bigger than life. And we don't like we did back in the day. We have a few. There's a few out there that's bigger than life, but not many. Not many. I mean, people rather play around on their phones, cell phones, than sometimes watch the match, or they just there to snap a few pictures or whatever, doing their thing. But wrestling has a niche group of fans, and it is what it is. They have a niche group of fans. I mean, out here on the indie scene, man, we have put on shows, we have booked shows, and we have worked shows ourselves. And, we've worked shows that we know the type of people that's going to come to these places. And we went and done podcasting at certain shows and was amazed at some shows because you saw a group of people that you wouldn't expect to come into a wrestling show. And those shows always big. They always dynamic. The fans going crazy. But you never see those type of people at a wrestling show. And that's the kind of crowds that AEW needs and the WWE. WWE has probably 10%. I'm talking about a big scale. Let me look at somebody like Turbo Pro Wrestling in Greenville. Man, their fan base is totally different than what you see at 20 independents outside of it. Let's see, 3 Count Pro Wrestling outside of Greenville. Their crowd is different than what you see at 15%. I say 10, 15 promotions outside of it. Let's see, who else? Uprise Pro Wrestling. Uprise up in North Carolina, man. Those people, the fans that came in there, man, was just wow. You say wow when you looked at their crowd. They were just totally different. But wrestling right now, wrestling has a certain group, niche group, kind of like golf back in the day, NASCAR back in the day. NASCAR now have more of a wider range of fans. Golf does too, thanks to Tiger Woods. Tennis does too. Thanks to those sisters, man, that really revolutionized the sport. But I don't know, man. Wrestling right now, wrestling needs this Caitlin Clark. They need a Caitlin Clark, guys. They really do. All right, let's see. All right, Chandler says, if we're talking all wrestling, Danielson, Moxley, Young Bucks, Omega. Now, look, Kenny Omega, when Kenny Omega comes back, he's not He's not active. That's what the reason I said. Like Kenny Omega, I pay 30. I pay double to see Kenny Omega. Bryan Danielson, no. I wouldn't pay a dime to see Bryan Danielson. I think he's good, and there's people that's going to pay, but I don't think he's a game changer. And he wasn't a game changer. He was when he first came there, but they basically was trying to kill. They was basically trying to kill Daniel Bryan, and they did with Bryan Danielson. And he's not one of these. He's not a huge market. He's not a huge market. He's not a market changer, guys. Jon Moxley, no. To a certain point, yeah, he's going to bring in some fans, but he's not going to bring in a whole bunch of fans. You're not going to have your 2,000 seats going to 4,000 seats because you got Jon Moxley in there. If he was, he would already do it. Young Bucks, definitely no. Young Bucks could have been. Young Bucks should have been the next Rock and Roll Express, man. When we first came back and started doing this Straight Up Wrestling show 3.5 years ago, I told Chris, I said, hey, they could be the next, they could be like the Rock and Roll Express. But the thing is, and I'm not going to blame it all on them. A lot of it has to do with the booking. Okada, yes, Okada should be. But Okada, booking not good enough. Tanahashi should be. Young, we'll see where that goes. Will Ospreay, definitely Will Ospreay. Same with him. Will Ospreay is a superstar, but he has to have better booking. My man Chandler Wright says everyone is gonna love Moxley when Shane McMahon arrives in AEW. That's the whole thing about it, Chandler. Will he arrive in AEW? And as far as Shane McMahon, how much do you think he's gonna change? I don't think he's gonna change much of anything over in AEW. Yeah, of course, people will tune in to see what's going on for a couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. But I think it's going to be more of the same old. Unless Shane McMahon is bringing in that Pops McMahon, he's bringing in seniors' ideas. Hey, they're not doing anything because I'm going to tell you like this. Shane McMahon was just a performer. That's all he was. And a figurehead inside the WWE. Shane McMahon was not involved in creative. I don't know if that kid has a creative bone in his body. He was not, he's not his daddy, man. He's not his daddy or his grandfather. He's not them. So I don't know what in the world they're going to do with him as far as creative. I don't know what Vince has left. I really don't. Now, Vince has had a lot of time to sit and think. Now, Vince, don't let his age fool you, man. I'm sure that old man still got a lot of great ideas. So if we see Shane, you better believe Vince ideas is coming behind it. It's not going to be Shane's because Shane, he's never done anything as far as creative, man. No, he hasn't. All right, let's see. Glenn White says, what's up, Glenn? What's up, my brother? What's up? Appreciate you joining Straight Up Wrestling Show tonight. But yeah, man. Yeah, the wrestlers. Wow. Yeah, the wrestlers are not selling wrestling no more. I mean, they don't sell wrestling. It's the promotion. And yeah, some of these wrestlers that you named, Chandler, I will go and give them credit for being able to hold AEW up. And they get the reason, they are the reason that they selling. But in the WWE, I can point maybe six to 8 wrestlers I can point out in the WWE right now. I say fans that are actually buying tickets to see these guys. But for the most part, most of these fans come because it's the WWE. And fans, the fans today, like I said, man, they are all fans are hungry for what went on in the past. For you younger fans who's like, in their 20s and 30s, you guys are longing for the days of when, John Cena had the title. You guys are longing for that. What happened when John Cena had the title or CM Punk back in his heyday, when he was younger, in his prime. That's what you hungering for, guys. Straight up. The millennials are hungering for the Attitude Era. The Attitude Era. They want the Attitude Era back. They want it bad. That Attitude Era was so strong that it pretty much have, it pretty much have lended itself to today where people are still, the consumers, the wrestling populace want to see that. They're hungry. They want it. And then you have people my age and, Generation X, because there's a younger, Chris is 10 years younger. He's Gen X. but he's 10 years younger. So he missed a lot of things, even though he knows about it. He missed a lot of things in the 80s. Well, he was watching in the 80s, but he was young. He was watching the WWE. And then he realized, and he was watching NWA. He said he really didn't understand it that much, but that's because he started off watching wrestling, Saturday Night Main Event, watching Hulk Hogan and people like that. But man, most Gen Xers, we're longing for the days. We are looking for wrestling to go back to, hey, the way it was, and not necessarily the way they wrestled, but the way it was, man, when Flair was running, was ruling the roost, when Jerry the King Lawler was ruling the roost over in, over there in Memphis. We're looking for those days, man. We're looking for the old school days of when Junkyard Dog was dogging everybody out in Louisiana, out in the Mid-South territory, man. We're looking for the days when, the Von Erichs and the Fabulous Freebirds, used to tear it up down in world-class championship wrestling. That's what we're looking for. Those are the things that sold wrestling back in the past. And like I said, everything with wrestling, back in the day, you can look at every aspect of it. It sold. The wrestlers sold wrestling. The storylines was so great, so outstanding. It sold wrestling. The wrestling magazines, the Bill Apters, even Dave Meltzer, because he was a wrestling columnist back in the day. Stanley Weston, those guys. You used to walk into, like I say, you could walk into a convenience store. You walk into a convenience store, you walked into some supermarkets. You walked into a Walmart sometime, and the wrestling magazine was right there before you left out. And if they was only just on the stands, they had a wrestling, not a wrestling stand, but they had a magazine stand. The wrestling magazines was even in front of the Anton magazines, the football magazines and things like that. Wrestling magazines was out front. People picked those things up. People wanted to see them. But there was so many elements back when I was growing up that built wrestling, man. It was incredible. All right, Glenn, what are y'all talking about? Well, Glenn, right now, tonight, man, I've been talking about, is the talent selling wrestling, or is wrestling selling itself? And then I'm going to talk about a little bit of Stallone and Schwarzenegger who win. I have not talked about that. I'm going to talk about those two guys, if they was wrestlers back in their heyday, back in the 80s, man, when they was just really ruling things on the action-packed scene, as far as not wrestling go, but as far as on the movie screen. All right, but so basically that's what I've been talking about. I've been talking about that for over an hour now, hour and 2 minutes, basically on the same thing, Glenn, as far as that go. Chandler Wright says, got to head out, like your show, brother. I will definitely tune in next time. Appreciate you, Chandler. Hey, Chandler, come on over, man, to our YouTube channel, Straight Up Wrestling Show on the YouTube channel. Appreciate you joining on Facebook, but definitely come on over, man, because we have a big community here on YouTube. So definitely come and sign up for our YouTube channel, man. Hit that like, share, subscribe button over here on YouTube too. Appreciate you, Chandler, coming in, checking us out, man. Thank you. All right, let's see. Chandler says, I'm going to try to be back in a minute. Okay, it's all cool, man. All good. It's all good. But yeah, Glenn White, I appreciate you coming in, checking us out, man. I appreciate Scott Larson being here. But once again, guys, if you're listening to this, you hear me on YouTube, you hit that like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, ding, 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 so you know we're on like times like these. And if you over on Twitch, you do the same thing that you do over here on YouTube. And guys, if you are listening to me over on Facebook, hit that like, share, join. And guys, if you are listening to us over on X, guys, hit that like, tweet, and retweet, and follow the Straight Up Wrestling Show. Really appreciate you coming in and listening to, some of the things that I'm talking about, as far as wrestling selling itself. I'm saying it again. Is the talent selling wrestling, or is wrestling selling itself? Because, man, the talent that we have in wrestling, everybody's got to admit, it's all contained in wrestling, guys. All contained in wrestling. And I know the fans out here, we want to say that these guys are huge, man. They're big. They're known. Hey, people know them just like they know an NBA player, or they know a football player. They know a baseball player. I have to say wrestling might be even more popular right now than baseball when it boils down to it. But they are more known than a rapper or a singer or something like that. I know. Hey, back in the day, those guys were Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair. All those guys, Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, Andre the Giant. year in and year out, they will have on the news at the end of the year, who was your favorite wrestler? I mean, not your favorite wrestling personalities, but who was your favorite sports personalities through this year? Who was the most famous athletes? And it never failed. Out of they have 5-6 athletes, and two wrestlers always were getting the running. People voted for at least 2 wrestlers every year, along with the Wayne Gretzky's of hockey fame, along with the Michael Jordans, along with Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, along with Walter Payton, Roger Staubach, Joe Montana. Hey, wrestlers was always in that mix, guys. That's saying a lot, man. That's saying a lot. So, hey, but wrestling has to get back to that. It really does. It really does. And, I have to go back to independent wrestling, guys. Independent wrestling, that's what me and Chris does. That's what we do. There's a couple shows, couple companies, man, CMW Wrestling and PWF Wrestling. Me and Chris, we do the booking for all of them, creative for all of them, for both of those shows. But we go around and do commentary, do podcasting at a lot of different shows. And when it boils down to it, people come out to those shows because it's wrestling. They don't come out there because of the performance. They hoping to see certain performance. But for the most part, those guys, they might bring 7 people in. Sometimes maybe 10, sometimes 1, sometimes 4. They might bring that many number of people to come see them. Their friends or family, mainly their family that come and support them. But when it boils down to it, nobody really comes out extra to see them. Wrestling sells itself, guys. The promoters, it has to come from the top until the promoters can get their heads back in the game and know the right thing to do instead of copying what everything else that they see out here. Hey, man, we have a problem. We have a problem, straight up. All right, Chandler says, never mind, I'm back. Damn, you went to a Hillcrest? So did I. Yeah, I went to Hillcrest, man. I went to Hillcrest in Simpsonville, South Carolina. All right. Drinking some water here. All right, guys. But hey, yeah, that's my little take on that as far as wrestling, wrestling selling itself. Yeah, I believe wrestling definitely selling itself. You have certain wrestlers that, yeah. Oh, okay, cool, Chandler. Yeah, you have certain wrestlers, man, that's selling the sport, but overall, wrestling sold itself. All right, my man. Let's see. But yeah, man, back in the day, man, Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone of Rocky fame, Arnold Schwarzenegger of the Terminator, Terminator fame. That's the biggest movies that they actually played in. Each one of them played in a lot of different different movies. Arnold Schwarzenegger back in the 70s, I think it was 76 or 77. I think it was 76. Pumping Iron. I mean, Mr. Universe. Great body, one of the greatest bodies I ever seen. Probably the greatest body I ever seen as far as bodybuilding. Man, outstanding. Rocky, Sylvester Stallone done so much with his body as far as building himself up, to be in the Rocky movies and everything. And he even done it as an older man. And so, hey, big ups to both of those guys and the things that they've been able to accomplish. But, what if they was wrestlers, man? How do you see them as far as if they was wrestlers and those guys had to go up against each other? How many times would Stallone win out of 10 against Schwarzenegger? Who would get the upper hand? I think when it boils down to it, as far as in wrestling matches, I think Arnold Schwarzenegger probably would have won 7 out of 10, but Stallone probably would have had the better career. I believe he would have had a better career. I believe Stallone would have worked better with partners. I believe Stallone would have been more of a grappler, a scientific wrestler. I think he could have did a lot. Now, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think he would have been a great wrestler, a great champion, somebody who would have won some championships, probably win a world championship. I believe Stallone could have did it too, especially back when he was doing those territorial days, the territorial system. They could have won on different coasts, like, say, even WCW and WWF or the WWE, but WCW, WWF back in the day. Stallone probably could have been a WCW champion, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think, if they was on different coasts, kind of like the Sting and Ultimate Warrior thing, they would have been champions on both coasts. And then you could have had those two become tag team. I think they would have worked well as a tag team. But I definitely think Stallone would have been good as a tag team wrestler. Man, he could have did things, some great things with a lot of different people. I can see this guy teaming up with a Scott Steiner back in the day. I can see this guy, man, Sylvester Stallone. I can see him maybe teaming up with a Billy Jack Haynes or somebody like that. But he would have been a great tag team partner to have for any wrestler back in the day. But yeah, so I say Stallone would have had a better career, but Arnold Schwarzenegger probably would have won more world championships. Oh no, I ain't gonna say. I think Stallone might have had more title reigns, but I think Stallone would have had a better career, but I think Schwarzenegger probably would have beat him 7 out of 10 times. So 7-3. So I'm going to roll with Schwarzenegger on that, guys. The same way they booked Shamrock. Yeah. Straight up. No doubt, man. But yeah, I appreciate everybody coming in. Like I said, once again, I appreciate everybody coming in, rocking with me tonight here on the Straight Up Wrestling Show. And Chandler Wright, like I said, Chandler, man, come on over and sign up for us, sign up with us over on YouTube. If you got YouTube, definitely come sign up with Straight Up Wrestling Show over on YouTube. Appreciate you coming on our channel over on Facebook. We definitely appreciate that too. But guys, I am out of here for tonight. For my man Christopher Burton, who's not here with me tonight. Hey, and I appreciate my man Chandler Wright coming through. Appreciate my man Glenn White coming through. Appreciate Scott Larson coming through, and anybody else who came through to see the Straight Up Wrestling Show, man. And we will see you guys a little bit later. All right, Chandler, I got you. I will. Appreciate you, my man. You guys have a great night. Stay straight up. Peace.